All right, I wanted to talk today about the Toronto Raptors, as I think they're just kind of like in this juxta- juxtaposition in terms of direction of the franchise, as it can go two ways. This could be a team that is actually building something, and it seems mm, unique. A lot of wings, a lot of transition offense, and a lot of size is the immediate takeaway. And the reason why I wanted to do this was I just thought their recent game, they just exhibited something that I thought was interesting for a team, especially now that they have Brandon Ingram and with Scottie Barnes. Like, you remember Vision 6'9"? It's kind of weird to think, but Vision 6'9" is still a possibility, and it's almost coming to fruition. But before we continue, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think and why? And do you guys agree with me that I think what they could potentially be building or aiming to do could be great, and they've already picked up the options for Darko Rajakovic for an additional season, not going into this year, but following this year. So that's where I think it's even more interesting because you have yourself a guy who's going to, you know, continue to build what they have already here, and that's good. That's good. That's what they needed. And to me, right now, look, you got Grady Dick, who I think he's a guy who has kind of like a streakiness to him, but he exhibited, confidence and a willingness to be a shooter. So you have something there. I think with Ochai Abaji, he's a solid shooter who offers some defense, playmaking, and position versatility. I think they've started to figure out either Orlando Robinson or, and I think they've done a good job with like looking at their bigs. I think Orlando Robinson, I've always enjoyed his game since he came out of college as a guy that I thought at the very least could be a decent player. And for me, the biggest thing I would like to say is this team is showing the right stuff. Let's talk about it. So outside of like finding guys who fit what they want with, Jameson Battle and AJ Lawson. I don't expect like a ton of these guys to be futuristic players in terms of are they gonna have a role besides, Ochai and Grady. I almost said Gary. Grady being legitimate players who could, and Jameson Battle. Jameson Battle is like a stretch forward, low assists and low free throw volume, but 9.5 points, 4 rebounds. He's gonna, put the ball up in the court. And I think those guys can be rotational players with, Battle, Ochai, and Grady Dick, all there. Those three guys are like 9 point per game scorers since, the All-Star break, obviously. And that's what I was just wanted to bring up. Like, if you look at the team's numbers since the All-Star break right here, Grady Dick and Ochai and Mr. Jameson Battle were all putting up 9 points a night. And obviously, we had just talked about those guys who were like 10-day contracts and two-way guys. But outside of that, Jonathan Magbo, he's been a guy who's giving you good energy, solid on the glass. And yeah, he's not going to shoot the ball much, but he's pretty, consistent at what he does. And then you look at the rest. I think the biggest thing to look at is Jamal Shead. I think he's another one that his defense, and he's, I think, played the most minutes in games for this team. Maybe not the most minutes, but he's been one of their most consistent players, and he provides a perimeter impact defensively that they needed. Kobewalter, I think, as the season has come to close, as I said, his stats since the All-Star break, about 11 points, 4 rebounds, and about 25 minutes a night. He's a guy who he isn't committing too many mistakes, and he's actually been plus in the box minus since then, which is like showing some efficiency if he's going to be like the type of role player that they want. But going back to what I'm saying is obviously this offseason, I think they need to work on their efficiency in the half court, especially from their spot up shooters and just making better decisions in the transition offense. Like they could take advantage of being a better half court offense, especially when you have guys like Scottie, Immanuel Quickley, Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett. All right. I think you could really kickstart the fast break and take advantage of those situations and be a team that controls those moments. Now, I think let's just talk about what is this team overall. Since February 21st, they're 9-15. The season record's 28-50. They're 11th in the East. They're the 26th, I guess you would say, ranked offense, 16th ranked defense. They're 24th in net rating. I really think this is just a team that will have streaks where they'll struggle with with consistency, and they'll get a strong win over like a team like Phoenix or Philadelphia. And obviously, now those two teams are flawed, but you'll have them then lose to Phoenix. And I know beating a team twice is hard, but they'll then get blown out. And that's something that I find interesting for a team that, in terms of their pick and roll ball handling, I think, yeah, because they only have Jakob, but I think because they also have Jonathan Marbo, they should be running the pick and roll more to at least create opportunities for each other. As this is a team that their spot up frequency, about 21.5% of the time, their shots are spot ups. They're not good. Okay, their points per possession is like 1.05, which is a poor ranking, and they're not a good isolation team, but they're a good post up team. They're good scoring inside, but they don't do it enough. And the problem is that in their pick and rolls, their spot ups, and their isolations, which is their highest frequent, like the most possessions of sets, the plays that they run the most, are inefficient, and they finish poorly in transition. While they're a team that gives up 115 points per night, they're actually a good defensive team. Like, they defend spot up shots well, defend the pick and roll, especially the ball handler, well. And one of the things that they struggle with is obviously stopping they don't have a lockdown defender, so they're not a good isolation defense in terms of stopping ISO scores. And they don't have a rim protector, so their opponent field goal percentage at the rim and their post up D isn't the best. But they have an above average defense versus pick and rolls and spot ups. They struggle at containing isolation scores and defending post ups consistently. So to me, I think having a guy like Scottie, who's basically going to be able to get, if for a season, he's a guy who could average like 27-7. Just the guy that you're trying to build a team around, and who is your like core contributor. While RJ Barrett, he's been kind of like your most reliable guy this year, even if it isn't the most efficient. And then Immanuel Quickley's been injured for most of the year, and he's finally came back, and he's been pretty solid, like a 20-6 guy for you. Is he the point guard of the future? I think that's really what the jury is trying to find out. And Jakob Poeltl's been efficient scoring. I mean, I don't think he's the interior anchor you want, but this is a team that moves the ball 28 assists a night. They average, though, 14.5 turnovers per game, which is basically for every 2 assists they have a turnover, which isn't great. And they're an above average offensive rebounding team, but they struggle with fouling and turning the ball over, which obviously both of those things are going to affect your rotation and make it harder to consistently have the same players on the floor. So I think that's one thing. So to me, if you can get more consistent shooters on the floor, as we said, Jamison Battle, Grady Dick, and Ochai Agbaji are all guys who I think are like consistent role players who can shoot. I think Jamal, Shead, and Jonathan Mogbo are the other two guys those 5 guys, if they're off your bench, that's pretty solid. So then you look at Immanuel Quickley, and I guess it would be then not Grady, but Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scottie Barnes, Jakob Poeltl is your starting lineup. Again, as we said, is either you do look for that lockdown defender, or Darko Rajakovic believes that they can implement a scheme that's going to be able to help mask those defensive issues. And the thing is they're attempting 36.5 3-point attempts per game, but the fact that they're shooting below league average at 34.8% is not what you want as a team. And I think obviously building around Scottie Barnes, I don't know what the expectations with Brandon Ingram is. Is it to trade him down the road? Is it to make a move? Because I think that's one of what leaves me to be kind of flummoxed by this whole situation is, what do they expect a guy like Brandon to provide. As of right now, it's like he hasn't played. He has not played, which is crazy to think. Is that like he got traded there, and from my understandings, they hope he comes in and plays at some point. But this is the part of the video where we've been avoiding. So we're just gonna have to touch on that. From my understanding is that they hope to like close out the season and get a couple games at least to see what that looks like. I mean, he could get flipped. The whole thing is, I can tell you right now, Brandon Ingram only chose to go to Toronto because he could have gone to Atlanta, but Atlanta didn't want to give him as much money as the Raptors did, so he chose to go to the Raptors to get more money. But that's the whole thing. I like the idea of the team on paper. Will it work? I don't know, but you have under contract next year Brandon Ingram at $38 million, Quickley at $32.5, RJ Barrett at $27.7, and then you keep looking. I think the biggest thing is looking at the rest of it is that Jakob's at 19.5, and then Scottie's at 38.6. You still have Grady, you still have Ochai, you still have kobewalter and Jonathan Magbo, Jamal Shead, Jameson Battle, and then the rest of the roster is pretty much free. So that's where, like, what do you believe? And do you have faith that it's going to be enough? Or are you going to build around that? I think there's a lot of questions to answer, but I think the foundation's solid. It's just, I wish you could have gotten a better player than Brandon Ingram. And is Brandon Ingram supposed to be used to get a bigger fish? Those are the questions that I have. Let me hear your thoughts.